The night in Westlake Hills was as still as the lake outside the porch, where the golden lights of wealthy mansions spilled onto the black water like fallen stars. Inside the Whitman estate, the grandfather clock struck 3 times to remind a 17-year-old girl that her probability test, the kind she could solve in her sleep, had just come back with a red F, bright as a misplaced streak of lipstick. Maya Whitman sat upright at the walnut desk in the study, her fingers interlocked so tightly that her nails were pressed into her palms. The test paper lay there like a glaring wound, while the mechanical pencil beside it rolled softly whenever the air conditioner sighed. She looked at it the way one looks at a crime scene photo. Her camera-like memory replayed automatically. Problem 7B was correct, but she deliberately marked D. Problem 13, Bayes' theorem, would have solved it, but she wrote a convoluted transformation and reached the wrong conclusion. Problem 20, the final one, she held her breath a second before purposely filling in a random answer, all perfectly accurate in the strangest sense. Accurate according to a plan to sabotage herself. The study door creaked open, and Jake Whitman leaned against the frame. He was 40, with dark brown hair threaded with silver, tall, and broad shoulders, a man once dubbed by tech magazines as Austin's post-logistics pioneer. But tonight, his eyes carried the faint shadows of a father who stayed up late trying to understand his daughter. No laptop, no Zoom calls, just a steaming cup of hot cocoa. Still up, Tiger. He used the nickname from when Maya was 3, when she counted glow in the dark stars on the ceiling faster than anyone. His smile was gentle, but his eyes reflected every shade of worry, like the lake outside reflected sky and darkness. Maya shoved the test paper into her notebook too fast, loud enough that she could even hear the uneasy rustle. "I was reviewing for next week," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. He set the cocoa down beside Linear Algebra Done Right, the book she always kept there as a mask of intellect, a mask she had abruptly refused to wear since 3 months ago. Jake sat across from her, not too close to corner her, not too far to seem distant. He had mastered this balance when Catherine, his wife, was still alive. Even distance is a kind of language with those you love. "Miss Patel sent an email," he said, voice soft as wind through leaves. "She says you're struggling a bit with probability." Maya swallowed. One word from her could collapse the wall of lies. "I did it on purpose." But in her throat sat a knot named that phone call the night 3 months ago, in the kitchen, when she got up for water and heard her father's tired, low voice. "Ethan, sometimes I just wish she were normal like other kids." Normal. The word stabbed her like a pin on a map, fixing her to a single coordinate. Don't be too different. Since then, every F was a prayer. "I can be normal, Daddy. I'll try." "Do you want me to find another tutor?" Jake asked, pausing on the word another, because 6 tutors had already quit for the same reason. Maya understood everything, but at test time, it was as if someone else took the exam. Maya smiled, the kind of smile that belonged to an "I'm fine" school photo. "Maybe. Later, Dad. I want to try on my own first." "1. All right." Jake nodded, holding his smile like a candle shielded from the wind. "I'm always here, you know that." He stood, but at the doorway, he turned back, pointing to the drawer where Maya had hidden the paper. "Want to talk about that?" The chill of the air conditioning seemed sharper. Maya nodded, then shook her head. "Not tonight." Part of her wanted to confess everything. The other part feared seeing something besides love on his face, disappointment maybe. She wasn't sure her heart could take it. Jake nodded again, and left for real this time. His footsteps on the carpeted hall were almost soundless, yet Maya felt each echo through her chest. She opened the drawer, pulled out the F, stared at it until the red ink blurred into a pool of color. Then she folded it and tucked it at the back of the notebook, a place like the bottom of a lake where no one swims. Outside, night wind rustled through the oaks. Downstairs, the robot vacuum crept like a well-behaved pet. Maya rose and stepped onto the balcony. Austin stretched far, and downtown, there was a chain of lights. She hugged her arms, wondering, if tomorrow she got every answer right, if she brought home an A and laid it before her father, would he breathe a sigh of relief, or would he bring up normal again, as though it were a sacred vow? Her phone buzzed. Group chat, memes, complaints about English homework, plans to catch live music on South Congress this weekend. Maya scrolled, heart shrinking. She could understand cubic polynomials as easily as reading poetry, yet she felt lost before an ordinary teen evening. So this was what normal really was the hardest thing. The next morning, Westlake Preparatory woke to the scent of asphalt warming under the Texas Sunday. The campus looked like a miniature college, football field, theater, gleaming glass classrooms, and at the center, Rose Courtyard with its round fountain. Maya crossed the grounds, Phoebe Bridgers playing softly in her earbuds, trying to let the music fill the void. Passing the basement hall janitorial closets, art studio, tech room, she glimpsed a figure, a woman in a grey uniform wringing out a mop, movement steady as breathing. Maya had noticed her before. Upright posture, eyes that often followed students with an attentiveness unusual among custodial staff. Sometimes she paused before the STEM club board, reading robotics competition posters with a gaze that seemed both knowing and nostalgic. Once, Maya had spotted her in the library at lunch, absorbed in a thick book of symbols that looked like hieroglyphs but were really advanced math. Yet whenever Maya walked past, the woman offered a brief polite smile, bowing her head, the presence of someone who knew she was invisible to the wealthy. Today was no different. Maya moved on, but behind her, the woman, Doctor. As her badge read, Serafina Brooks, narrowed her eyes as though seeing a strange equation. She had been watching Maya for 3 weeks. The way her pencil hovered over the correct answer before swerving, the way she glanced at the clock at the 10th minute of every test, the perfect moment to begin sabotaging herself. Serafina, who once researched self-sabotage in gifted teens, recognized that fracture instantly. It spelled the word normal. Math class began at 9:20. Miss Annika Patel wrote conditional probability across the whiteboard, her letters clear. Maya listened, understood, and translated faster in her head than the lecture itself. She even visualized graphs and sample space partitions, like pieces of stained glass forming a cathedral window. When Miss Patel posed a question, Maya lowered her head, pretending to take notes and letting others answer. She heard herself whisper in the silence, "Don't be too different." Midway through, her phone buzzed on the desk. Office notification, Maya Whitman. Please see Principal Park at lunch. Her stomach tightened. For the past 3 months, she had been a regular visitor to the principal's office in the worst way. Improvement plans, counseling, pressure adjustment. She closed her book, swallowing a sigh that made no sound. At lunch, the principal's office was as cool as conversations meant to calm. Courteous and composed, Linda Park set a folder of notes before Maya. "Maya, you're a student of rare potential," she said, voice like silk draped over a chair. "But your grades lately, could you help me understand?" Maya shook her head. She could deliver an entire speech about lack of sleep, debate tournaments, eating time, health issues, but each lie would only push her further from the one person she wanted to protect, her father. And somewhere down the hall, Serafina pushed her supply cart, pausing a second, like someone overhearing a familiar melody through the next room. The day slipped by like water through hands, cool, vanishing. At the end, Maya drifted into the library where everything still had order and solutions. She pulled The Art of Problem Solving and set it before her like a ritual. She had learned to perform these rituals under watchful eyes. Teachers, friends, even her father. "I'm still me, just a little out of sync," she once said, and she played the role well. A white envelope appeared when she returned to her seat, lying across the open book as if it had always been there. No sender, only round, soft handwriting. "To the radiant soul." Maya blinked. Strange letters belonged in teen dramas, not real life at an elite prep school. She looked around, only bookshelves and sunlight spilling through the windows, scattering across the floor like fish scales. She opened it. "To the radiant soul," the letter read, "I've seen you dim your light. I've seen your heart shrink. Each time your pencil pulls away from the right answer like a soldier retreating from the straight road home. You are not broken. You are sacrificing your truth to buy a love that true love never demands. If you want to stop breaking your heart, meet me tomorrow at noon in Rose Courtyard, by the old oak. Seek the woman who sees your worth when you yourself cannot. Someone who understands. Old? Maya read it 7 times to test whether the words would dissolve into ink dust. Each round of reading was another thump of her heart, like the wind pushed a door ajar. Who wrote this? Why, I've seen. Why were those words identical to the ones she whispered to herself at night? She imagined a prank, a trap, a teacher trying to drag her into an intervention process. But there was something about the handwriting. Gentle, formal, believing in Maya more than Maya believed in herself. The most dangerous thing was the feeling stirring in her chest, hope, the kind she had locked away long ago. She stuffed the letter into her jacket pocket, leaving the library like someone carrying a secret both too heavy and too light. In the hall, she passed Serafina, mopping the steps, with soft and steady movements. When Maya walked by, Serafina looked up, their eyes meeting for less than a second, just long enough for Maya to feel something strange, as though she had been read. She quickly turned away. That evening, dinner at the Whitman estate was lasagna baked with golden cheese, her father's go-to dish when he wanted to make the kitchen feel safe. They ate, discussing the school basketball team and Jake's new AI project at Whitman Dynamics, optimizing relief supply flows during coastal hurricanes. Jake spoke excitedly about a young team of engineers he was mentoring. Maya nodded and asked the right questions still. The daughter who cared was intelligent and could lift her father's story higher. Both played a well-meaning role, sheltering each other from the storm. "You okay?" Jake asked at the end of the meal, the nightly question. His hand rested on the table, not reaching for her, but opening a bridge. "I'm okay," Maya answered, then added a rehearsed line. "Miss Patel gave me some extra materials. I'll look at them." Jake smiled, light as laying a napkin on a plate, trying not to drop a sigh. "I believe in you, and I love you, exactly as you are. No conditions." In Maya's mind, that sentence collided with another memory, his hoarse phone voice. "Wish she were normal," she asked. "Dad, what does normal even mean?" But instead, she rose to clear the dishes, saying, "I'm going to study a bit," then hugged him as if she were the one who needed to protect him from his own storm. Night fell like a heavy blanket. Maya stared at the ceiling, the letter under her pillow like a heated stone. Someone who understands. On her wall hung a Polaroid of her mother, Catherine, smiling in a cream sweater in front of UT Austin's library, where she once volunteered. Every time Maya looked at it, she heard an invisible echo. "You are loved because you are you." But memory was like moonlight through curtains bright enough to see, not warm enough to hold. The next morning, Maya arrived at school earlier than usual. She stood at the edge of Rose Courtyard, near the old oak, its trunk so wide it would take 3 students to encircle, its bark rough like a map of time. The Texas breeze carried a faint rose scent, while the fountain sprayed mist thin as a prayer. Maya checked the clock, 12:14. The letter had set the time at 12:15. When the minute hand struck, a figure stepped out from the row of stone columns. The woman in the grey uniform, black hair neatly tied, eyes deep and still as a lake on a windless afternoon. Serafina Brooks stopped before Maya, keeping a distance just far enough not to corner her, yet close enough for the girl to read Brooks on the name tag clearly. "Hello," she said, her voice like a quiet jazz tune in a cafe, warm and resonant. "I'm the one who wrote the letter." Maya flinched slightly. She hadn't known who she expected, but certainly not a janitor. A streak of suspicion rose. "Why did you write to me?" "Because I see you making yourself smaller," Serafina answered directly, without circling. "Because I once lived that way so long I almost broke. And because no one told me the one thing I needed. You don't need to be loved only if you're normal. You're already loved because you are you." Maya pressed her lips together. All her defensive answers slipped off her tongue. "You don't know anything about me," she said, but her voice wasn't as sharp as she wanted. "I know enough to see the weight on your heart," Serafina said, eyes steady but not invasive. "I know your pencil pauses on the right answer before swerving. I know you glance at the clock exactly at the 10th minute. I know you help classmates solve problems you purposely miss in class in the hallway, and I suspect you do it, so someone can sigh in relief that you're normal." Maya's heart pounded like a snare drum. Who told you that? She glanced around, half expecting hidden cameras. No one. I watched. And I remembered, Serafina said slowly. That ability was part of my old work. She paused, reminding herself not to say too much too soon. But today, I'm not here to assess you. I'm asking, do you want to stop hurting yourself? The wind stirred through the oak, a leaf spinning down to rest gently on the stone bench. Maya stared at it, recalling evenings with her mother at the window, listening to rain. Her mother had said, "You're a poem not yet given a name." She swallowed a warm lump in her throat. You said I do it for someone. I think I overheard Dad say something once, and since then everything feels off track. Serafina nodded, not pressing with questions that would tear wounds wider. One careless word is like a stone thrown into a lake. The ripples last longer than the thrower imagines. But the lake can grow calm again if no one keeps throwing. And if the one throwing is me? Maya asked, half laughing, half about to cry. Then you can drop instead of throw, Serafina said. Drop a truth. You are not responsible for making others comfortable by dimming yourself. She looked at Maya briefly, then held out another thin envelope with only one line on the front. For when you forget. These are things I once wished someone had told me. If they fit, keep them. If not, throw them away. I won't be upset. Maya hesitated, then took it. The paper was absurdly light compared to the weight it carried in her hands. Why do you care? The question burst out, raw. Because I see something beautiful you're about to shatter, Serafina answered, voice unwavering. And because I once picked up those shards of myself long, exhausting years, no one should have to do that alone. For the first time, Maya looked directly into the woman's eyes. She saw not the pity of certain teachers, not the curiosity of classmates, but a light hard to name, respect perhaps, and an understanding born of experience, not theory. For nearly a minute, she said nothing. The fountain's water and the rustling leaves played a background score. Then the lunch bell rang. I will read it, Maya said, lifting the envelope slightly. Thank you for this. Serafina smiled like someone hearing the right note struck. Tomorrow, if you want to talk more, I'll be here. If you don't come, I won't chase. Your path is yours. As Maya left Rose Courtyard, she felt an invisible rope loosen around her chest, not because the problem was solved, but because for the first time, someone hadn't treated her as a project to fix. She opened the second envelope later, sitting in a library corner where sunlight formed a rectangle on the carpet. Inside was a short list, handwriting as graceful as a poem. You don't need acceptance at the cost of your best self. Intelligence doesn't make you less lovable. It just means you need the right people to understand. Normal is the statistical median. You are a beautiful exception. If someone loves you only when you pretend, they don't love you. Let your truth cause a stir. A sea too flat has no waves. Maya read, lips moving unconsciously. The phrase, beautiful exception, made her chuckle softly the first time she ever laughed at the word exception. She imagined what her mother would say. Perhaps a wink. You're the poem not yet named, remember? She tucked the page into her wallet, beside her mother's photo. That afternoon, when Jake arrived early for the parent council meeting, he passed the second floor and happened to glance through a window into Rose Courtyard. He saw Maya sitting with the woman in the grey uniform, her shoulders less tense, her head slightly higher. He froze, hand on the railing, heart pounding with relief and wonder. Who is she? A question not tinged with control, but with fragile hope. Maybe someone understood his daughter in a way he hadn't reached. Evening fell, Austin glowing. Maya entered her room, turned on her desk lamp, and pulled out today's math worksheet. She read each question, this time not rushing to find the wrong answer. Her hand hovered on the pencil, breath exhaling slowly. She promised no dramatic rebirth to anyone. She only promised herself one small experiment, one correct answer, just one. She filled in question 1 with B, not because it was the only way to be loved, but because it was the only way to be honest with her heartbeat. Downstairs, Jake stirred cocoa. He watched the powder swirl into the hot milk, remembering his daughter's expression in the courtyard that afternoon. Something had shifted, subtly but undeniably. He didn't know who the woman in the grey uniform was and didn't yet understand what was beginning. Still, he silently gave thanks for something mysterious. Sometimes, love entered a home not through the front door, but through the basement hallway, the place most overlooked. And perhaps there, the most enduring things were quietly cleaned every day. Maya sipped the cocoa, sweetness warming her tongue. She opened the window to let in the oak-scented night air. On her desk, the old F lay beneath her book like a relic of a broken pact. She didn't tear it up. She didn't need a dramatic gesture. She placed the new page over it, which read, "Beautiful Exception." 2 sheets stacked, the past beneath, a promise on top. In Westlake Prep's basement hall, Serafina locked the supply closet, her hand pausing on the padlock for a beat, as if to end a refrain. On the path to the parking lot, she tilted her face to Austin's sky, where the stars were fewer but shone harder against the city lights. Tomorrow, she told herself, if she comes, I'll speak about how fear distorts truth. If she doesn't, I'll pray she remembers she is a beautiful exception. And the night carried on like a black river, upon which, for the first time in months, Maya no longer felt adrift without an oar. She held a tiny paddle, a letter, and in her chest, a glimmer bright enough to name hope. And that is how every healing journey begins, not with fireworks, but with a correctly written B, a lunchtime meeting, and someone quietly saying, "I understand." At noon the next day, Rose Courtyard was bright again in the Texas sun, the roses blazing red like promises kept in confidence. Maya arrived 10 minutes early, her mind tangled like a string of unsimplified equations. She told herself this could be someone's cruel joke, that she would end up sitting alone like a fool. But then, at exactly 12:15, Serafina appeared, holding a leather-bound notebook with worn edges, her grey uniform so spotless it became formal attire. "You came," she said, not surprised, as if she were certain Maya would show up. Maya gave a slight shrug. "I just wanted to see." They sat on the stone bench beneath the old oak. The fountain's water became a backing layer of sound, covering the silences that might have made a conversation awkward. Serafina opened her notebook, revealing pages filled with math formulas, psychological diagrams, and literary quotes. "This is my world," she explained. "A part of me no one here cares about, because all they see is the mop." Maya glanced, her eyes immediately catching a formula for entropy and information theory. "You do this for fun?" Serafina smiled. "Some people do crosswords. Some people play Sudoku. I solve complex systems. It helps me remember who I am." Maya hesitated, then whispered, "I'm trying to forget who I am." The sentence fell between them, heavy as stone. Serafina tilted her head slightly. "Because you believe that if you shine too brightly, the person you love will be dazzled and turn away." Maya bit her lip and didn't answer, but her eyes glimmered with tears. Serafina didn't wait for confirmation. She told a story. "When I was your age, I learned so fast my classmates called me the brain that doesn't laugh. I started faking ignorance, making mistakes, forcing laughs, because I thought that's how I'd be accepted. But the price was, I lost myself in the mirror. One day, I realized there's something worse than being abandoned by others. Abandoning yourself." A breeze came, blowing away a few rose petals. Maya whispered, "I heard my dad say, he wished I were normal. Since then, Her voice caught, the sentence unfinished. Serafina set the notebook down and leaned in, not touching, but close enough that her voice became an anchor. "Maybe he worries you're lonely. Maybe he fears you won't find friends on your frequency. But you know what? People who truly love will learn to hear even the hardest frequencies. You don't have to turn your volume down." Maya turned away, tears sliding down. "What if I'm wrong? What if what he really wants is just a normal daughter?" "Then you still deserve to live truthfully," Serafina replied hesitantly. "True love is never a contract to trade light for palatability." A silence. Then Maya asked, trembling, "Why do you care about me so much?" Serafina looked straight into her eyes. "Because I see a soul snuffing itself out, and I once nearly suffocated that way. No one deserves to go through it alone." The bell signaling the end of lunch rang. Students began to leave the courtyard. Maya stood, quickly hiding her still wet gaze. "Tomorrow, can I come again?" Serafina's smile opened slowly, like a door. "Tomorrow, next week, or as long as you need. I'll be here, under this oak." When Maya turned to go, her steps were lighter than yesterday's, as if an invisible force were supporting her from behind. Jake Whitman witnessed the scene on the second floor through a glass pane. He saw his daughter hugging her books to her chest, a brightness in her eyes he hadn't seen in a long time. And he saw the woman in the grey uniform, her posture, her listening, her gaze not like an ordinary custodian. He didn't know what beginning he had just seen, but his heart told him this. Someone had just handed his daughter a key. On a Friday morning, Rose Courtyard at Westlake Preparatory was radiant like a painting. Beds of crimson, lemon yellow, and pure white roses were carefully trimmed, their fragrance faintly drifting in the air. Texas sunlight was anything but gentle, but in the corner shaded by the ancient oak, the light fell in softened patches, turning the courtyard into a quiet oasis amid the bustling campus. Maya Whitman stepped in with her heart beating like war drums. Inside her backpack, she hid a folded sheet of paper, the strange letter that had appeared in her locker that morning. The handwriting was neat, slightly slanted to the right, soft like brushstrokes. Its contents left Maya stunned. "Dear brilliant soul, I have seen you hurting yourself. You are not failing. You are sacrificing your truth in search of love. But true love will never ask you to shrink. If you are ready to stop breaking your wings, meet me in Rose Courtyard at lunchtime. Look for the woman who sees your worth, even when you cannot. A friend who knows." Maya read it repeatedly, her photographic memory imprinting every ink stroke like a snapshot. But her analytical mind screamed warnings. Who would care this much about her? Who could know the secret that not even her father knew? When the lunch bell rang, Maya nearly wanted to flee. She gulped down a bite of sandwich, then followed the tiled hallway leading to the rose garden. The school was crowded with rich kids, always noisy with expensive sneakers and loud laughter, but this garden was strangely empty. There, beneath the oak, sat the custodian in her grey uniform, Serafina Brooks. In her hand was a small notebook, but her eyes were fixed on the wooden gate leading into the garden, as though she was waiting. Maya hesitated, slowed, feeling like an intruder in a story that wasn't hers. "You got the letter," Serafina said, her voice warm, natural, as though no confirmation was needed. Maya froze. "It was. You?" She nodded slightly. "I wrote it, and I hoped you wouldn't find it too forward." Maya gripped her backpack straps, torn between anger and relief. "You were watching me?" "I observed," Serafina corrected, "because I saw a reflection of myself in you years ago, and I couldn't stand to watch a soul suffocate itself to please others." Maya gave a strained laugh. "Sounds dramatic. I'm just dumb." Serafina shook her head. "I've seen you solve equations in your head faster than the teacher at the board. I've seen you explain concepts to classmates that the teacher couldn't understand. And then on a test, you write the wrong basic formula. That's not dumb, that's deliberate." Those words pierced through the shell Maya had painstakingly built for 3 months. She swallowed hard, saying nothing. Serafina lowered her voice gently. "The letter is only a doorway. If you don't want it, I'll stop here. But I don't believe you want to live like this forever." They were quiet for a while, only cicadas in the distance and water trickling. Then Maya sat down, half a meter away. "Why do you care? You're just a janitor." Serafina chuckled softly, unoffended. "No need to apologize. Everyone thinks that. But you know what? A person's worth isn't in the title on their badge. It's in what they choose to see in others." Maya looked up at her, eyes dark and deep, catching a strange light. Suddenly, she felt herself believe. "You think your father doesn't love you," Serafina continued, her tone steady. "But I've seen the way he looks at you. That's the gaze of a father who loves his child to the bone. He's just helpless, and he doesn't realize that one fleeting sentence shoved you into a pit." Maya was stunned. "You? No? I guessed," Serafina replied. "Because one sentence can haunt a lifetime, especially for kids who are too sensitive, too intelligent." A breeze passed, carrying the sharp scent of white roses. Inside her, Something softened and hurt at the same time. "I don't want to disappoint him anymore," she confessed. "If I were more normal, maybe he'd feel at ease." "Are you sure?" Serafina asked, eyes intent. "Or are you just thinking on his behalf? True love never demands we fake stupidity to be accepted." And a tear fell onto Serafina's notebook. Maya quickly wiped it, flustered, but Serafina didn't pretend not to notice. She pulled a tissue from her pocket, handed it to Maya, then continued, "If you want, come back tomorrow at lunch. Not to study, not to be better, but to remember the joy of being yourself. If you don't, I'll understand, but you'll know someone will always believe in your light, even when you try to put it out." Maya held the tissue, silent. In her heart, a tiny seed sprouted hope. That afternoon, Maya sat in chemistry, her mind far from the formulas. Every word Serafina had said echoed like a refrain. She looked around, friends laughing, showing off designer bags, chatting about weekend trips. None of them knew her battles, no one except the woman who scrubbed floors. After school, Maya returned home. The Whitman estate gleamed, with its turquoise pool and glass walls stretching to the ceiling. Her father waited in the dining room, forcing a smile. "Good day at school, princess." Maya pressed her lips. The word princess made her chest tighten. She nodded vaguely, then excused herself upstairs. In her desk drawer, the mysterious letter remained. She opened it again and read every word. This time, instead of pressure, she felt comfort. Downstairs, Jake Whitman sat alone with a glass of wine, recalling his daughter's eyes today sparkling with a faint light so different from the gloomy months before. He didn't know why. He only knew that he felt hope for the first time in many months. The next day, at 12:15, Maya stepped into Rose Courtyard again. On the stone bench, Serafina Brooks was waiting. This time, Maya didn't hesitate. She sat, opened her backpack, pulled out the math test marked with a glaring red F. She placed it between them, whispering, "You were right, I did it on purpose." And in admitting it, she felt a boulder lift from her chest. Serafina nodded gently, no judgment, only a smile. "Then let's begin here. Not begin to study again, but begin to learn how to love yourself." Jake Whitman happened to pass not far away from a window on the second floor of the main building. His eyes landed just in time to see his daughter talking and softly laughing with the custodian, a sight he had never imagined. Inside him, curiosity stirred alongside a faint gratitude he couldn't name. He didn't know that moment was the red thread, tying the three of them together, opening a journey none could have foreseen. Rose Courtyard became the secret meeting place of Maya and Serafina. Every day at 12:15 sharp, the 17-year-old girl walked in shyly, bringing along her latest tests, messy notes, and eyes that constantly flickered with unease. On the first day, Maya only dared to admit she had intentionally made mistakes. On the second, she confessed that her greatest fear was her father's disappointed gaze. By the fifth day, Maya broke down sobbing in the arms of the woman in the custodian's uniform, crying like a child finally permitted to stop pretending to be strong. Serafina never taught as a tutor. She didn't bring a chalkboard and didn't assign homework. Instead, she asked, "Do you remember the first time you found math beautiful?" Maya had been baffled. Beautiful? That word had never been used in her math classes, yet a memory sparked. When she was 8, she had been mesmerized watching numbers multiply into snowflake patterns on paper, entranced as if watching fireworks. Maya nodded slightly. "Then go back to that beginning," Serafina said. "Math isn't a weapon to prove you're smart. It's an art, and you deserve to enjoy it, without anyone's permission." In the following days, Maya began rewriting formulas in her notebook not to submit, but to sketch them into patterns. Whenever she saw a symmetrical sequence, she exclaimed, "Wow," and Serafina smiled. "That is the real girl." Rumors began to spread through Westlake Preparatory. Some classmates wondered why Maya suddenly paid attention in class. She no longer feigned ignorance when teachers called her to the board. Instead of deliberate mistakes, she solved step by step, neatly and concisely enough to leave the class stunned. A few snickered, claiming she must have cheated or hired outside help. But many teachers began whispering in the faculty lounge, "The Whitman girl seems to be back." At home, Jake Whitman sensed the change vividly. One evening, he passed by his daughter's room and heard her reading a passage from Pride and Prejudice aloud. She analyzed Elizabeth's character enthusiastically, as if she were giving a college literature lecture. He stood outside the door, his heart warmed and aching. This was the Maya he knew, brilliant, passionate, unafraid of her own light. And suddenly, he realized that he hadn't lost her in these past months because she was inadequate, but because his clumsiness had made her doubt herself. On the 10th day, when Maya handed Serafina a chemistry test marked 98, she whispered, "This time, I didn't make mistakes on purpose." Serafina nodded, her eyes glowing like evening sunlight. "And how does it feel?" Maya thought, then let out a rare giggle in the rose garden, like finally exhaling after holding my breath too long. Upstairs in the classroom building, another pair of eyes still watched. Jake had accidentally discovered the meetings and chose to observe instead of intervening. He saw his daughter laughing, her shoulders no longer drooping, and he saw the unfamiliar woman with her neat bun, worn shoes, and grey uniform sitting patiently, listening as though Maya were the most critical person in the world. For the first time, Jake felt defeated. He, a billionaire with every resource, had not been able to make his daughter smile like that. One weekend evening, Jake decided to open up. While they ate spaghetti together, he asked, "Do you want to tell me what's been going on? I can see you've changed." Maya hesitated, spoon pausing midair. Part of her longed to confess everything. About Serafina, the tears in the garden, and her fear of her father's rejection, but anxiety tightened her lips into a smile. "I'm just trying harder." Jake nodded, not pressing, but silently promised himself he would find a way to meet that woman. On Monday morning, the math class held a surprise test. Maya scribbled quickly, finishing in 15 minutes. The teacher looked up, astonished. "Are you sure, Maya? The class has a whole hour, and you're done already?" Maya swallowed, staring at the blank page in front. The old fear surged. Classmates would think she was different if she got everything right. If she made mistakes, Serafina would be disappointed. But then she remembered the words, "You don't need anyone's permission to shine." So Maya nodded. "Yes, I'm sure." When the grading was done, the results made the whole class gasp. A perfect 100, not a single step wrong. The news spread through the hallways. Whispers followed. She must have hired a tutor. No, she cheated. Maybe she used a photographic memory. But Maya no longer bowed her head. She lifted it high, accepting every stare. That afternoon, she rushed straight to Rose Courtyard, holding the test before Serafina. "I did it for real, and I don't regret it." Serafina smiled, her eyes radiant. "That is Maya." The rumors eventually reached the administration. Principal Linda Park summoned Maya to her office. The Korean-American woman, stern but fair, looked at the grade sheet. 3 months ago, you were failing every subject. Now you're at the top of the class. How do you explain this?" Maya swallowed, heart pounding. She couldn't mention Serafina. The woman had warned her to keep it secret until she was truly ready. She only replied, "I guess I stopped being afraid of being smart." Principal Park raised her brows slightly, then smiled. "If so, then use that intelligence to make a positive impact. Join the school's academic decathlon team. I believe you're capable." Maya was stunned. The academic decathlon team was Westlake Prep's pride, reserved for only the most outstanding students. She nodded, both thrilled and terrified. That afternoon, Maya rushed to Serafina, recounting everything. "I'm not sure I can. They're all real geniuses." Serafina laid her hand on the notebook, her voice steady. "You are a real genius too. The only difference is you used to hide it." Meanwhile, at the Whitman estate, Jake sat in his study, looking at a photo of his late wife, Catherine, on the desk. He whispered, "You'd be proud of her. She's coming back." But guilt gnawed at him. Who had helped Maya? And why couldn't he, her father, have done it? He remembered the figure of the woman in the schoolyard. One day, he told himself, he would thank her. Life began to change. Dinner was no longer silent. Maya talked about chemistry experiments, literature essays, and science projects. Jake listened, heart full of joy but also struck by the realization the last time he'd heard his daughter chatter like this was when Catherine was alive. Serafina had rekindled Maya's fire, and his as well. One night, after Maya had gone to bed, Jake searched online for information about Serafina Brooks, but the record was nearly blank. Her name was on the custodial staff list, and there was no photo or background. The oddity made him more determined. He had to meet her face to face. On the day of the academic decathlon tryouts, Maya trembled with nerves. In the auditorium, Jake sat in the front row, for the first time openly supporting his daughter. Serafina stood backstage, still in uniform, gripping her mop handle like a staff to steady herself. When Maya walked onto the stage, her eyes met both of theirs, her father and her silent mentor. She inhaled deeply, then began answering a probability theory question with unwavering clarity. The audience erupted when the judge announced, "Completely correct." Maya smiled, the light on her face leaving Jake stunned. In that moment, he knew his daughter had found herself again. The competition ended with Maya securing a spot on the official team. She hugged Serafina tightly backstage, whispering, "You were right. I don't need permission to shine." Serafina hugged her back, but her eyes flickered with sadness. She knew that the truth about her would come out sooner or later. And when it did, would Maya's and Jake's trust remain intact? In the empty classroom, Serafina sat alone that night, opening her thick notebook. She wrote a new line among formulas and literary quotes. Today, Maya Whitman chose light. But is Jake Whitman ready to see it and to see the truth about me? Her pen stopped. Moonlight streamed through the window. A new chapter was about to begin, and it would not only change Maya, it would change all three of them, forcing them to face truth and love. On Saturday night, Austin was hit by a sudden rain, as if the sky needed to let off steam after a week of harsh Sunday. The streets of Westlake Hills reflected the strings of porch lights like ribbons of stars slipping from the sky. At the Whitman estate, the kitchen lights poured out a honeyed glow, the smell of roast chicken with rosemary drifting down the hall, wrapping around the large window on the oak garden. Jake Whitman opened the oven to check the tray of potatoes, then glanced at the clock. 7:12 p.m. Maya still hadn't come down. He had heard her footsteps pacing upstairs for half an hour, a different rhythm, as though she were practicing how to begin a complex sentence. "Spaghetti or roast chicken?" he called, keeping his voice even. There was no reply. He closed the oven, wiped his hands on a kitchen towel, hesitated a few seconds, then left the kitchen, walking along the hallway lined with family photos. Catherine in a cream-knit dress, 6-year-old Maya hugging a fluffy dog, all three of them standing in front of the UT Austin Library on a sunny day. A thin layer of dust had settled on the frame edges. He brushed it away and wondered what else he had let dust settle on these past months, on unasked questions, on fears left unnamed. He knocked on Maya's door. "Princess?" The door cracked open. Maya stood in a grey hoodie, hair tied up hastily, her dark eyes glinting between tension and resolve. "Dad, can we go somewhere to talk? Not at home." Jake paused. "All right. Where do you want to go?" "Zilka or Lady Bird Lake, somewhere with wind." She bit her lip. "I want to talk for real, Dad." At that moment, Jake saw a trace of Catherine and how Maya had arranged her words. Catherine often chose to take the hard things out to the porch, where the wind and the sky could shoulder some of the weight. "Give me 10 minutes, he said with a small smile. "I'll drive." 15 minutes later, the Range Rover rolled down the road out of the hills, wipers swiping fast across the windshield. Maya hugged a thin rain jacket, watching the streaks of light stretch like threads. In the silence, she could hear every sound belonging to the car alone. The fan, the tires cutting through puddles, the rhythm of her father shifting gears like a breathing pattern. She thought of Rose's courtyard, warm noons with the sound of falling water, and Serafina's hand on her notebook when she said, "You deserve your own light." Her heart felt lighter, and she was also afraid of stumbling. The words she was about to say would be a bridge over a chasm. She feared it would break halfway. They stopped at the lot near the old stone bridge by Lady Bird Lake. The rain had thinned to a fine mist, a cool breeze skimming the lake surface. Determined runners still jogged under the rain in waterproof jackets, city lights in the distance becoming haloed rings, the two sheltered under the wooden awning of the kayak rental station. Jake handed Maya a hot chocolate from the small shop across the street, a habit he'd kept since Maya was in first grade. She took it with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her skin. "I want to start," Maya said, looking at the lake. "I think I owe you the truth." Jake looked at his daughter, heart tightening. Such vague openings often preceded things parents fear. "I'm listening." Maya drew a deep breath. 3 months ago, I heard you on the phone with Uncle Ethan. You said, "Sometimes you wished I were normal like other kids." Her voice trembled slightly, but her hands darkened the cup sleeve by gripping too hard. "From that day, I started making mistakes on purpose. If I were normal, you'd worry less, be less. Disappointed that I was too different. I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to be someone easy to like, easy to be around, easy to handle. I thought I had to step back to make you feel at ease." Rainwater rolled off the edge of the awning, dripping steadily. Jake felt as if the ground slid from under his feet. He remembered that night clearly. A partner had joked crudely that kids who are too smart are a hassle, and he, exhausted after a long meeting, had sighed, "Sometimes I just wish she were normal." In his head, normal meant less lonely, less of the odd looks from peers, less isolation at school parties, less tug-of-war between the adult world and being 17. But he had said it curtly, without care, and the one person he least wanted to hurt had stood there in the dark and heard. "Maya," Jake said, his voice rough, "I'm sorry." The words burst out as if they had been waiting for months and had finally found the door. "The word normal," I said, "was stupid. I never wanted you to be less intelligent. I never wanted that. I was afraid you were lonely. I feared you'd feel out of place because your mind runs faster than everyone else's. I was afraid." He swallowed a lump. "I was afraid no one would understand you, including me." Maya stayed silent, eyes fixed on the small ripples of the lake. "But I understood that word differently. I heard, 'Dad wants me to be less me,' and I did the stupid thing. I broke my own wings." Jake turned to face his daughter. Under the awning, the yellow light fell on Maya's cheeks, making visible tear tracks blurred by mist. "I blame myself for not being there to hear you explain. I should have asked why before looking for a 7th tutor. I thought money, resources, the right people could fix everything. But you needed to hear, there's nothing to fix." Maya looked into her father's eyes, and the small walls she had built for defense began to crumble. "Do you know how afraid I was of my own light? Every time I raised my hand too quickly, the classroom went quiet. Every time I finished before everyone, I heard hisses tinged with irritation. I knew people thought I was arrogant, showing off. I was tired of being myself while keeping others comfortable. When you said normal, it felt like a pardon. I suddenly believed that shrinking was my way of loving you." Jake inhaled the smell of wet wood and rain. "Catherine, your mother used to tell me that special ability isn't a thing you hide away so it doesn't dazzle others. She said, 'Light shines. If someone squints, they can wear sunglasses.' I forgot. I let my fear speak in place of love." An empty kayak thumped against the shore with the rhythm of the waves, a hollow, steady sound like knocking on memory. Maya smiled faintly, for the first time during the conversation. "Mom would joke that you always pick sunglasses that are too ugly." Jake laughed, relieved at the familiar tone in his daughter's teasing. "Thank God you can still joke." His smile faded as he went on. "Has someone helped you through these months? I saw you talking with someone at school. A custodian. I don't know if I should ask, but I want to thank her." Maya tightened her grip on the cup, her heart thumping with a mix of gladness and worry. She sank into silence for a few seconds, heeding Serafina's advice. "Your path is yours. When you're ready, you'll know what to say." At last, she nodded. "Her name is Serafina Brooks. She sent me a letter, unsigned. She saw me making myself small. She didn't teach me math. She taught me to remember the joy of understanding something new. She taught me that loving you doesn't mean betraying myself. Jake's eyes widened. The pieces he had quietly observed from the second-floor window clicked into place. Serafina. He repeated the name, testing how it felt in his mouth. Do you trust her? Like I've never trusted anyone besides Mom and you. Maya said so honestly that even the wind seemed to pause. She doesn't look at me like a repair project. She sits, listens, speaks little, asks just enough. She told me she once pretended to be dumb to be more acceptable to others. She said, "That's like abandoning yourself." Jake leaned back against the wooden post. I owe her a thank you, and I owe you a big apology. Not just for that stupid word, but for being absent in spirit. I was present in the house, handling meals, but not present in the smallest corners of your life. One question after class, 1 minute of sitting still while you ramble about something you love. I let my own pain missing your mother blur my view of how you kept growing. Maya nodded slowly. You have a right to hurt. She breathed in, as if diving into a quiet lake. But next time, if you see me doing something that makes you uneasy, could you ask me first? Don't call tutor number 8. Ask why, like today. I promise I'll ask you instead of guessing. Deal. Jake offered his hand. Maya placed hers on top, warm through the fine mist. His hand enveloped hers, like a vow from years ago rewritten to fit their new life. He squeezed lightly. I want to ask more, if you'll allow it. Do you want to rejoin the academic team and pursue the things you truly love? If your classmates repeat things, I can learn how to stand behind you like a wall. Maya laughed. If you're the wall, you'll block the whole stage. Then I'll be a lamppost, he said, smiling back, then sobering. A lamppost that doesn't outshine you, just enough to light your way. Maya looked at the lake, where the rain had finally stopped, and the surface was smoothing like glass. City lights shimmered in reflection like strings of beads. I want to apply to Stanford. It's only a thought. I love applied math. I like seeing models at work, from traffic to relief supply flows during storms. I want my light to do something useful. You want Stanford, Jake repeated slowly, feeling pride bloom in his chest. I'll walk with you. Not because it's cool, but because it's your calling. He paused, hesitated a second. I want to propose something else. May I invite Serafina to dinner to say thank you? Only if you're comfortable. Not to recruit her for anything. Just gratitude. Maya pressed her lips together, a mischievous smile flickering. She likes lasagna. Valuable intel. Jake nodded with mock gravity, then softened. I promise to keep the right distance. I don't want to disturb your safe place at school. Iswen, I think she'll be glad to know you understand what normal means, Maya said, then glanced at him. Try redefining it. Jake looked up at the clearing sky, thinking, normal is a silly word. Let's replace it with at peace. I want you at peace in your own light. Not the Instagram kind of sparkle, but the kind that doesn't go out, whether the room is empty or full. Maya smiled, eyes shining. Provisional definition accepted. Oh. They sat quietly, letting the words settle into the structure of their home, into the beams of the awning, into the lake water, into memory. Far off, a young couple whooped as a kayak slid across a band of light. Maya rested her head on her father's shoulder, a rare gesture since her mother's funeral. Jake set his chin on her hair. The simple orange scent of her shampoo mingled with damp wood. In that moment, the old pain didn't disappear, but shifted position. It moved to the side, making room at the center for something else, fragile but real reassurance. Dad, Maya whispered, if next time I'm afraid of my own light, remind me of the sunglasses line. Deal. He chuckled. I'll buy a nicer pair. Please, Maya pouted, then turned serious. And, if next time you're scared because I'm different, say so. I can't read minds. I'm only good at probability. Actually, they're the same, Jake said. Both are guessing with a confidence level. And tonight we each raised the other a few percentage points. As they drove home, the roads had dried, and the sky opened to a few scattered stars. Maya leaned her head against the window, dreamy-eyed about tomorrow, about the meeting under the oak canopy, about Serafina's face when she heard that Maya had told her father the truth. She imagined what she would recount, that Dad had rethought the word normal, that they had set new if-then rules like a family logic function. If afraid, then ask. If assuming, then stop. If loving, then speak. She felt her heart like the lake she'd just left. There were still waves, but calmer in the wind. When they got home, Maya was about to head upstairs, but paused at the staircase. "Dad," she turned back, stunned for a second. "Thank you for being there today." Jake nodded, his throat tight with almost spilled tears. "Thank you for inviting me outside. Tomorrow I'll tell Serafina about dinner," Maya said, half asking, half announcing. "I'll make lasagna," he winked. "Not the normal kind." Maya shook her head, laughing, and ran upstairs, her steps light as though she no longer carried any secret suitcase. Jake stayed in the living room, dimming the lights, leaving only the soft golden string around Catherine's photo. He stood before it and spoke softly, as if chatting after a long day. "Do you see? Our girl is back, thanks in part to a woman in a grey uniform. I'll thank her properly." He touched the edge of the frame, cool to the touch, then pulled out his phone and opened the calendar app. Dinner, Serafina Brooks. Night flowed over the hills like a sleek black river, and one by one, the houses dimmed. In Maya's room, the desk lamp stayed on 10 minutes more, just long enough for her to write a line in her notebook. Light doesn't need permission. She closed the notebook and placed it on the old, F-printed paper. No tearing, no theatrics. She merely changed what lay on top. The next morning, the Texas sun opened its eyes early. Westlake Preparatory bustled, but Rose Courtyard kept the stillness of a small chapel. Maya arrived 10 minutes ahead, carrying 2 coffees, one black, one latte, because she still didn't know what Serafina drank. She set both cups on the stone bench and waited, suddenly nervous as before, an important presentation. Today, she would tell about the lakeside, the hot chocolate, the sunglasses, the new definition of at peace. She wanted to bring good news to the one who stood by her when the dark room was darkest. When Serafina appeared, walking past the columns, sunlight brushed the grey uniform and settled on her eyes that looked tired after a long night, but were still deep like a lake. "You brought 2 cups, she smiled. "Smart. I don't like making people guess," Maya quipped, then grew serious. "Yesterday I talked to my dad. I told him about the phone call, about the fear, about me being normal. He apologized, and we agreed to ask instead of assume." 0. Serafina listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, she nodded very slowly, the nod of someone who had just watched a minor miracle occur, according to the law of cause and effect. Sow truth, reap reconnection. "I'm happy for you," she said, eyes damp but voice mechanical enough not to break. "And for your father, too. One more thing." Maya drew a deep breath. "Dad wants to invite you to dinner to thank you. I told him lasagna." Serafina laughed. "You've betrayed my culinary taste." The smile faded quickly, a mist of worry drifting over her gaze. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Maya answered firmly, then looked deep into her eyes. "I want my light to be in the same room as those who helped me keep it. I want Dad to see." She hesitated a second, her voice softening. "And I want you to see that Dad is learning to wear nice sunglasses." "Who?" Serafina tilted her head, listening to the last word, then pressed her fingers together to steady a quickened heartbeat. "All right," she whispered. "I'll come. But, Maya, a day will come, and it will when I have to tell you and your father who I am. Not Serafina the custodian, the other chapters of me. That day, I hope you remember how today feels." "I will," Maya said. "I already have a metric, a heart beating at peace." Between them, the 2 coffees steamed lightly. Outside, a group of students ran by playing around, their laughter bending into warped notes, then rounding out again in the quiet air. A breeze shushed through the oak leaves, sprinkling a few warm shards of sunlight onto their shoulders, not hot, just warm. Maya looked around Rose Courtyard and suddenly felt this place was like a balanced equation, two sides as two people, the equals sign an unsigned letter, the constants a rainy lakeside, a promised dinner, a photo of a smiling mother. The result didn't need to be written, because it existed. A family that had raised its trust level, a girl who had stopped negotiating with the dark, a woman about to set down the mop to carry a heavier and worthier truth to offer. That afternoon, when Jake received his daughter's text, "Dad, tomorrow night, 6:30, I've invited her." He was standing in the warehouse of a new company project, watching a line of AGV robots glide like fish in an invisible tank. He saw the message and something lit in his chest. 6:30 lasagna, nice sunglasses. He texted back, not explaining, but smiling to himself for a long time. A colleague passing by assumed he had just closed a big deal. In fact, he had just closed something bigger, how he would use the rest of his life to tell his daughter, through 100,000 small gestures, that she needed no one's permission to be herself. That night, the Austin sky was scrubbed clean, and up on the hillside, a house dimmed most of its lights, leaving the kitchen aglow like a heart kept warm where warmth is needed most. In Maya's room, the corkboard above her desk gained a new slip of paper, neatly written, "If afraid, ask. If assuming, stop. If loving, speak." Next to it, the old F-printed page remained, serving as the background for a different layer of words on top. None of the three knew how tomorrow's dinner would open a path to chapters more unexpected than any of them imagined. But at this moment, they had done the hardest thing: turn their chairs toward one another, name the cracks, and choose to stay. Sunday afternoon in Austin was soaked in late autumn sunlight, the sky high as a glass dome polished clean after last night's rain. In the expansive kitchen, Jake Whitman stood before the large wooden table, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by the ingredients he'd laid out for dinner. He had looked up many lasagna recipes not just to cook it right, but to create the warmth of a real home, the kind he had lost after Catherine passed away. Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair neatly tied, a notebook in her arms. "Do you need help, Dad?" "Yes," Jake said, his eyes lighting up. "You handle the salad. Is she arriving soon?" "Probably in about half an hour." Maya picked up a knife and began chopping vegetables. Her heart beat fast at the thought of Serafina, stepping into this house still full of her mother's presence. She felt excited and anxious. Would her father and Serafina find a common language, or would they look at each other through a pane of suspicion? 6:35 p.m. The doorbell rang. Maya hurried out and opened the door. Serafina Brooks stood there, her usual uniform replaced by a simple yet elegant deep blue dress. Her hair was swept up neatly, revealing a face without makeup, but radiant in the porch light. A basket of freshly baked bread was in her hands, the buttery scent wafting out like a warm greeting. "Maya," she smiled, and their hug was as natural as if they had known each other for years. Jake stepped into the living room. When his eyes met Serafina's, time seemed to slow. He saw the woman who had made his daughter glow again. For a moment, gratitude surged, overwhelming his awkwardness. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice low but sincere. "I owe you more than a dinner." Serafina flushed slightly. "I only did what needed to be done. But I'm honored to be here." Dinner began with a hint of awkwardness, but the smell of lasagna and bread and Maya's laughter quickly dissolved it. They talked about school, reading tastes, and Austin afternoons strolling around Lady Bird Lake. Each time Maya shared something, Serafina listened genuinely attentively, and Jake looked between them, his heart gradually letting go of its defenses. When dessert arrived, Jake set down his glass of wine and sat up straight. "I want to say this before we part tonight." He turned to Serafina. "You saved my daughter. Not from low grades, but from a silent war I didn't notice. I will be grateful to you for the rest of my life." Serafina was silent, her eyes lit with emotion. Finally she said, "You don't owe me." Maya saved herself. "I only held up a lantern so she could remember the way back." Maya smiled through a veil of tears. "But Dad, I wouldn't have had the courage to talk to you without her. She gave me the language." Jake took his daughter's hand. Then, as if drawn toward Serafina, he nodded slightly. That language, I want to learn it, too. Their gazes held a moment longer than usual, deeper, like two rivers discovering a confluence. In that instant, all three felt something larger taking shape, a family defined not by blood, but by truth, forgiveness, and a love just beginning to bud. After Serafina had left late at night, Jake stood on the porch, watching her car disappear down the hill. Maya stood beside him in silence. Then she turned, teasing, "Dad, Mom used to say you couldn't cook, but today, you surprised me." Jake gave a soft laugh. "Maybe I just learned that for the people who matter, you must be willing to learn from the beginning." He lifted his eyes to the Austin sky strewn with stars. In his heart, a voice murmured, "Perhaps this is the beginning of a new chapter for him, Maya, and the woman named Serafina." A week after the lasagna dinner, Austin changed winds. On the slope leading up to the Whitman estate, dry oak leaves fell in sheets like scratched paper rain. Maya biked home from school, her satchel thumping lightly against her back, her face pink from the wind. The academic decathlon team had just finished its internal selection round, and she was assigned the math and economics role, something she wouldn't have dared to dream of a month ago. On the way home, she stopped at a small bookstore on South Congress to buy a practice set, and on impulse picked up a children's novel with a quartz-colored cover she'd read at 12. The Garden of Dreams, the author signed as S.R. Brooks. She didn't notice the name until she got home. When she turned the book over, she saw a small black and white photo, a woman about 33, 34, hair in a bun, deep eyes, and cheekbones so familiar it sent a chill through her. Maya froze in the living room, the book thudding onto the carpet like a heavy question. She bent to pick it up, her hand trembling. The author photo resonated uncannily with Serafina, just younger by a few years. With a gentler gaze, she read the bio. S.R. Brooks is the pen name of an educational psychologist, Ph.D. from Columbia, specializing in gifted children. The series, The Garden of Dreams, has won 3 Children's Literature Awards and has been translated into 12 languages. At that, Maya's heart thumped, oddly. Columbia, gifted, pen name. If it was a coincidence, it was too many. "You're home?" Jake called from the kitchen. He saw his daughter standing there with the book and walked over. "Oh, S.R. Brooks, your mom used to read you a chapter from this when you were 10. She said these books were like lullabies for kids who feel too different." Maya swallowed. "Dad, have you ever?" She stopped, her throat suddenly parched. She hid the book behind her back and forced a smile. "I'm going to study." In her room, she set the book beside her journal. The crease at the spine looked like a secret smile. She opened her phone, typed S.R. Brooks author photo, and scrolled. Different images appeared, one at a conference in New York, one at an award ceremony in Boston, one at a children's signing in Phoenix. Hair in a bun, dark jacket, a sparing smile, unmistakable eyes. It was Serafina. Not looks like. It was her. Maya collapsed into the chair, her heart both excited and bewildered. Why hadn't she said so? Those noons beneath the oak, the words she had placed into Maya's hands, "You don't need permission to shine." Why did they align with experience and her profession? She remembered the thick notebook filled with formulas, the literary quotes mixed with psychological terms. She had laid the entire life map on the table without street names. A notification lit up. "Serafina, tomorrow, 12:15, I have a small gift for you. A ritual to remember the beat of a peaceful heart." The rare smiley from her warmed Maya. The warmth came with a sting. A secret stretched taut as a string in Maya's hands. She wanted to ask right away, but instinct reminded her, this story couldn't be tossed out in a hallway. It needed a space that knew how to keep silent. The next morning, Westlake Preparatory buzzed because a local station's camera crew had shown up. KVUE is doing a short segment on the new academic decathlon team, a classmate whispered. Also about Westlake's comeback girl. Maya's stomach flipped. She didn't want to be a refugee story for a few clicks, but Principal Park encouraged her. "Just a few lines, Maya. You have the right to say no. You also have the right to define your own story." The shoot was quick. A few classroom scenes, a couple of teacher soundbites. When it was Maya's turn, she said what she had learned. I used to fear my light made others uncomfortable. Now I'm learning to let it light the way for good things. The reporter nodded and cut. Maya exhaled. She headed back to Rose Courtyard, looking for the familiar grey silhouette. Serafina was already seated, her uniform still crisp, but something was different today. She had set a slim box on the bench. For you, she said, sliding it over. A fountain pen. Writing with a fountain pen slows you down, and in the slower pace the heart can hear itself. Maya smiled, admiring the walnut-bodied pen, the cap engraved M.W. Thank you. It's beautiful. She lifted the pen, and suddenly her throat tightened. The question in her head flicked like a fish, tailing the net. She set the pen down and looked straight into Serafina's eyes. You have a secret, don't you? Serafina didn't dodge. Her eyes flickered, but didn't cloud. Yes. She spoke as gently as placing something fragile. But I want to say it in the right setting, not in a hallway, between bells and glances. This afternoon? Maya asked. At my house. Dad should probably hear it too. She heard herself, both brave and afraid. I don't want to be the only one who knows. I want light to walk with truths. Serafina looked at her longer. Then she nodded. This afternoon, 5:30 p.m. The Whitman estate was honey gold in the late Sunday. Jake set the napkins and checked the vase of lilies Catherine had loved. He was strangely restless, half because of the vague flutter he felt whenever he thought of Serafina, half because of a hunch. Tonight something would change the shape of his family. When the doorbell rang, he felt like opening a book to a long-awaited chapter. Serafina stepped in, wearing the same deep blue dress as before, but her expression was more solemn, more prepared. Maya led her into the living room, where uplights cast rings of brightness on the ceiling like ripples. No one touched the appetizers. No one joked to break the ice. No, how's the weather? Only eyes searching for anchors in one another. Mr. Whitman, Serafina began, her voice so steady Jake knew she must have prepared for a long time. There's something I have to tell the truth about. It doesn't negate what I've done, but it's the part I didn't share. Jake sat up, tension taut as a drumhead. Please go on. I'm not only a custodian. Serafina looked at them both, letting her gaze roam nowhere. I'm a PhD in educational psychology from Columbia. Specialty, the emotional needs of gifted children. I lectured, consulted for several schools, and then wrote children's books under S.R. Brooks. I took the custodial job at Westlake after some parts of my life broke medical costs for my grandmother, a bad relationship, and my home was repossessed. I needed stable work, and I chose to stay in a school because that's where I could still see children like Maya, even without an office or a business card. The air was so still they could hear the soft hum of the AC. Jake blinked slowly, as if to water a field of words just erected. Maya said nothing. She had let the afternoon's shock drop away to make room for witnessing. Her voice didn't shake, her sentences were coherent, her hands only folded now and then as if pressing down a memory. Jake spoke first. S.R. Brooks, is you? The question hardly needed an answer. He glanced at the side table where the Garden of Dreams lay ready. He touched the cover lightly, as if touching a thread connecting the past, Catherine reading aloud chapter by chapter to the present, with the author standing here. It's me, Serafina said, and I'm sorry for not saying it right away. She turned to Maya. I never saw you as a case study. I saw a heart tightening itself out of love. I helped you loosen the knot. Who I am on paper. I feared it would make you think everything was just an intervention. I wanted you to be seen as a human being, not a chart. Maya stepped closer, not touching, just near. I know, she said softly. I saw it in the way you listened. But why didn't you trust us with that part of the truth? Serafina swallowed. Because I have been loved for a title before. Because people's eyes change color when they hear doctor. Because I wanted at least once for someone to look through the gray uniform and still see me. She faced Jake again, without circling. I'm saying it tonight because I don't want to begin anything on half a word. Begin anything? Jake echoed, his throat drying a little. The words dropped into the room like a pebble into a lake, the ripples touching all three. He looked into Serafina's eyes, recalling the laughter in the kitchen, the "I want to learn that language" he'd said, the way the kitchen suddenly became a home when she sat there. He realized he had been standing on the bank of that anything, believing he was still far away. Begin anything means family. Maya filled in for her, pressing her lips together. Begin anything means trust. Jake set the book down, laced his fingers, and looked at Serafina. Thank you for telling us. He stopped, searching for words like someone groping for stones in a river. I feel left behind for a stretch, not because you're a PhD, but these past weeks I have been proud that I saw someone nobody noticed, and it turns out my seeing was still lacking. He smiled at himself, without bitterness. I'm angry at myself. You have the right to be angry with me, Serafina said plainly. I should have said it earlier, but I feared losing the way you looked at me without the fogged lens of a title. Maya sat beside her father, touching his arm to remind him of what they'd learned by the lake. Ask before assuming. What are you thinking? Say it. Don't let it bloom in the dark. Jake inhaled, slow and deep. I feel replaced. He gave a sheepish laugh at how childish it sounded. Not in the kitchen. In my daughter's life. You walked in and said the sentences I should have said. Taught the things I should have taught. You saved her from a place I didn't see. I know gratitude. But the feeling of not enough seeps into the cracks of gratitude like water into wood, weighing it down. Silence. Serafina didn't rush to fill it. She let the words lie for a few beats. Then she spoke, each word firm. You are not replaced. I cannot be the one to wake Maya every morning, make hot chocolate before a test, or listen to this home's tired heartbeat. I cannot be the shared history between you and your daughter, the lake, the photo, the corkboards. I am the person who walked into the room and flipped a switch that you and Maya had already installed. Don't strip yourself of your own credit. Maya looked at her father, eyes gleaming. Dad, you're the shore. She's the lighthouse. I need both. The line tugged the fallen bricks back into place. Jake exhaled, his shoulders dropping. Thank you. He looked at Serafina with a thin but genuine smile. And I'm sorry I let that not enough slow my thanks this long. It should have ended there. A confession, an apology, a handshake. But deeper things rarely stay put. As they moved to the dessert, Jake's phone buzzed. A text from the company's PR. KVW airs the segment tonight. Please turn it on. There's something you should see. Jake frowned and turned on the TV. The frame appeared. A piece on Westlake Prep, the academic team, the comeback girl. Maya's face came up, impressively composed. Jake smiled with pride. The segment cut to praising teachers, then to a quick shot at the far end of the campus. Serafina in her grey uniform, cleaning the hallway, pausing to pick up a fallen scrap, her gaze unintentionally toward the window where Maya sat studying. The narration was neutral. Unsung heroes on campus, but the station's social media had captioned it. Who is the mystery figure behind Westlake's prodigy comeback? Below, comment poured like rain. Looks so much like S.R. Brooks. No way. The famous children's author working as a janitor? Why is she there? Staged PR? Maya felt her stomach hollow out. Jake stood and turned off the TV. An invisible murmur of public chatter appeared in the living room, the kitchen, and the house. Serafina sat very straight, her back like a drawn bow. She set her spoon down, dabbed her hands with a napkin, and lifted her gaze. Sis, Maya blurted. I'm sorry I didn't. It's not your fault, Serafina smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Truth has legs. Sooner or later, it runs outside. She turned to Jake. Here's the hard part. Some will say I played dress-up, will question my motives for getting close to your daughter. I've weathered storms like that, but there's one thing I've never managed. Getting through them alone and still keeping my faith in myself. I thought this time would be different, because I have you. The last sentence dropped onto the floor like a button popped off. Jake stepped forward, reflexively wanting to touch her shoulder, then stopped halfway. A shadow crossed his eyes. A boardroom full of shareholders. The question, did you let a pretender befriend your daughter? A tabloid headline about the billionaire and the mysterious janitor. The fear of reputation, the thing he'd thought he was done with, suddenly stood up and slammed his chest. Serafina saw it. She didn't blame him. She only gave a slight nod, as if noting a datum. "If you need time tonight, I understand." "No," Jake said too quickly, then slowed. "I need a few hours to line up words." He hated what he was about to say, but the words had reached his lips. "When the press asks, I have to know how to answer without hurting you, and without burning my house down." Maya looked at the two of them in her living room and felt like she was being pulled to stand at the seam of two winds. She heard the noon hours beneath the oak roll back like waves, her father at the lakeside say at peace, and KVUE's distant keyboard typing out words that could skew the story. She wanted to hold, to connect, but her arms weren't long enough to reach both at once. Serafina stood. "I'll go," she said, voice as calm as at the start. "I don't want tonight to snap under outside noise. I'll leave a truth here, in case the loud voices drown out our own." She took a small paperback from her bag and set it on the table. The Garden of Dreams, first edition, with a handwritten letter tucked inside, "For Maya, and for you." She looked at Jake without hiding or pleading. "I hope you choose to trust what you've seen with your own eyes. A girl finding herself again, and a woman simply doing the work she was born to do." Sir Maya stumbled over her name, tears crowding. "Will you come back?" Serafina bent and placed a light hand on Maya's shoulder, a brief touch, warm enough to bundle a string of noons into flesh. "Tomorrow the oak will still be there. So will I." Then she looked at Jake, as if planting a seed. "If you still want to learn Maya's language, I'll be ready to teach you the first letters." The door closed behind her. The house suddenly widened, half a degree colder. Maya stood petrified, then grabbed the book and opened it to the letter. The handwriting was neat, straight, familiar. Asterisk, "Dear Maya, if one day the truth about me makes you waver, read page 73 where Luna realizes her magic isn't for performance, but for tending the garden. You are not responsible for making anyone else feel comfortable about your light. You are only responsible for tending it enough to warm your loved ones. Dear Jake, if one day you hesitate between honor and heart, remember, true honor is how the heart treats truth when no one is watching. The rest is only noise." Asterisk. When she finished, tears fell onto the curved edge of the page like raindrops drawn on glass. Jake stood frozen, his eyes fixed on a single phrase in the letter, true honor. It was like a stone dropped into a well, sending ripples to the bottom of his feelings. Slowly, he sat on the sofa, rubbed his face, and sighed. "Dad," Maya called, her voice shaking. "What are you going to do?" Jake looked up. In his eyes, there was panic, a pride stung by being pushed into a wind shear, and another current what had risen at the lakeside that day. He looked at his daughter and thought of the evening the woman first stepped into their kitchen, the kitchen suddenly smelling warm bread. He thought of Maya's smile under the oak, the fountain pen engraved MW, and how Catherine used to call people like Serafina quiet guardians. "Tonight," he said, low but clear, "I'll turn off the TV. I'll read." He touched The Garden of Dreams. "And tomorrow, before 12:15, I'll stand at the edge of Rose Courtyard far enough not to intrude on your appointment, close enough to prove what I choose to believe." Maya nodded rapidly, burst into tears, and flung herself into his arms. "Thank you, Dad." She sobbed into his shoulder, a cry both relieved and frightened like a shower that's just passed, with clouds still lingering. Night slid through the house, leaving on the coffee table a book open to page 73, where Luna lays her hands on the soil and whispers a promise to the seeds. On the inside cover, a new line had appeared, Jake's handwriting, careful like a schoolboy's. "True honor equals heart times truth, when no one is watching." He bit his pen, smiling at himself for turning everything into a formula, then set the pen down. Beside him, Maya had fallen asleep on the sofa, still holding the book. Jake pulled a blanket over her and stepped onto the porch. The Austin sky glowed faintly orange. The city kept breathing. He looked toward the school, picturing the stone columns of Rose Courtyard, the stalwart oak. He told himself, tomorrow he would stand there, with no microphone in his hand, no flag in his heart, only the one thing he knew better than any noise. the choice to walk toward light, even when it set him in front of a mirror. In a small apartment in the city's south, Serafina switched off the lights, leaving only the warm desk lamp where she, Saturday. On the table lay an uncashed check, the latest royalty payment, and beneath it an unsent letter, a resignation from her custodial position, and an offer of collaboration from a Stanford pre-collegiate talent program. She regarded the two papers like two riverbanks. "Don't run," she murmured, "but don't hide either." She folded the letter, slid it under the teacup, and opened her notebook. A new line appeared beneath the formulas. "Tonight, I choose to believe what I saw with my own eyes." She paused and added another line. "And if they choose me not for a nameplate, I will stay." 12:10 the next day, the oak cast its shade like a giant umbrella. Maya stood beneath it, rolling the new fountain pen between her fingers. Footsteps, slow, sure, sounded behind her. She turned to see her father standing at the courtyard's edge, not stepping in, only giving a slight nod. She nodded back, soothed like a hot towel pressed to a sore spot. Then a figure appeared between the two rows of columns. Serafina, grey uniform, worn shoes, bare face, forthright eyes, no lenses, no captions, only three people, a rose garden, an oak canopy, and a conversation that needed to be restarted with whole words. The three stood in the simplest triangle humans can sketch with their feet. And like any triangle, it could collapse if one point is left, but it could also become a roof if they chose to stand and raise their hands toward one another. No one had raised a hand yet, but no one had left. Somewhere, someone posted another comment under last night's segment. Here, a fountain pen was uncapped, black ink flowing evenly. The first question rose, not what are they saying, but in our hearts, what is right? And this time, all three waited for one another to answer. The Texas sun set late, leaving the sky like silk washed with orange and purple. As the day's last bell echoed through the stone columns in Rose Courtyard, only three people remained. Maya sitting close to the oak trunk, Serafina standing nearby, and Jake Whitman at the edge of the courtyard. A few sparrows chirped on the tiled roof, as if eavesdropping. "I read your letter," Maya began, gripping the fountain pen until her fingers went white. "And I read your book. You write as if you were speaking to me from many years ago. I need to know. Everything you've done for me, is that love, or is it work?" Serafina drew a deep breath, as if gathering all her courage into her chest. "Maya, no paycheck covers the noons we've spent beneath this tree. No study requires me to engrave MW on a pen. I chose to stay because I recognized in you something I once lost in myself, and I couldn't turn away." Maya swallowed. Drops of tension fell onto the damp grass. Jake stepped closer, his voice carrying but gentle. "The question isn't only Maya's, it's mine too. I need to believe that the woman who walked into my home, the one Maya, the one my daughter calls Sis, isn't just a specialist testing a hypothesis." Serafina's eyes met Jake's. There was no defense left there, only rare nakedness. "Mr. Whitman, I once thought I'd never have to stand in this position between hiding to be trusted or revealing myself and risking losing everything. But last night, when the TV flashed me with that crooked caption, I understood. Truth doesn't need makeup. I am S.R. Brooks. I am a Ph.D. But I also ate lasagna in your kitchen, wiped Maya's tears, and believe a family can sprout from broken pieces. All of those things coexist." The air seemed to wait for a verdict. Maya glanced at her father, hope and fear mixed in her eyes. Jake folded his arms, then let them drop. He exhaled slowly. "If I'm honest," he said, "I thought about reputation, shareholders, sensational headlines last night. But this morning, when I saw my daughter asleep over your book with a small smile on her lips, I understood that true honor isn't in the papers. It's in how I keep that smile from fading. If I let other people's fear make me push you away, that would be losing honor." Maya burst into tears, but with relief. She rushed to hug Serafina, holding tight. "I don't care what name is on your book cover. I need you here." Serafina held Maya, then looked up at Jake. He had stepped fully into their triangle. "I won't promise it's easy," he said, The storm of public opinion and suspicious looks will remain. But I promise, I won't leave you to face it alone anymore. We'll make a family, if you want." Serafina's eyes shimmered. She nodded, as if a lifetime of searching had closed precisely this moment. "I want to. I have for a long time." The evening bell rang one last time, drawing a breeze through the oak leaves. In that moment, the three stood closer, forming the shape of a simple, sturdy roof. Outside, the world could chatter, but beneath this tree, a new family had been written in truth, and in a love that needs no permission to shine. Saturday morning, Austin was gentle like an apology from the Sunday wind from Ladybird Lake, blew across the oak-covered hills of Westlake Hills, carrying the scent of damp grass and wild jasmine. In the Whitman estate, Maya walked down the hallway lined with family photos, stopping before the frame of Catherine, her mother, smiling on the steps of the UT Austin Library, holding a stack of books like a bouquet. "Mom, I want to tell you something," she whispered to the photo, then kept walking, carrying the intention she had nurtured for days, to tidy up her mother's old room. Catherine's room was in the east wing, where morning light continuously poured like a milk river. The room remained just as it was the day she left, window framing a swath of sky, ivory-painted bookcases, a walnut writing desk polished by hands. Maya pulled on cotton gloves and opened the lowest drawer, a drawer she rarely touched because of the old smell of paper and time. Inside, beneath stacks of magazines and files, was a cherry wood box with a brass clasp. It wasn't large, but heavier than she'd expected, as if it contained a solid shard of the past. She set the box on the desk, breathed, and opened it. Inside were letters tied with a frayed blue ribbon, a soft, leather-bound journal, and a small velvet case. Maya lifted the journal. Her mother's soft hand was on the first page, Catherine Rose Bennett Journal of Things to Remember. The dates along the margins ran from when her mother was in graduate school to a few days before she passed. Maya stroked the page as if stroking her mother's hair. She opened the middle. "June," her mother wrote, reading The Garden of Dreams to Maya again. "The kid adores Luna, the child who dared light up the garden, though everyone was afraid. Strangely, when I read, I hear my little sister's voice somewhere, the sister who was given away when I was 7. Brian, the investigator, says the records are sealed, but I can't stop dreaming. If you're somewhere out there, I hope you write books to help gifted children, like you once were. Isn't it funny, Catherine? Give a wish a name, then meet it in a book sold at the shop on South Congress." Maya froze. The line about a biological little sister lit up in her head as if someone flipped a switch. She nodded as if speaking to an invisible person. "Hello, fate. I'm listening." She set down the journal and untied the ribbon around the letters. Most were letters her mother wrote to relatives. A few were to herself as therapy. But there was a stack of white envelopes, each hand labeled with the same line. "For S. When we find each other again." The envelopes had yellowed, their edges slightly frayed. Maya opened the top one, carefully, as if opening a door to time. "Dear S, my lost little sister," the letter began. "If this letter has reached you, a miracle has happened. I don't know what surname you bear, where you live, or who held you each night when you were small. I only know that when you were taken away, it felt like someone removed a compartment from my heart. I was 7 then. Our mother cried constantly. Our father was silent, and I learned to look at the space and call it waiting. A few years ago, I read a series of children's books signed by S.R. Brooks, and I don't know why, but I felt as if I could hear you. You write like someone who understands how children strain themselves to fit adult eyes. You use metaphors of seeds and shade, just like our mother used to say. Maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe I've wanted it so much I'm hallucinating. But if you truly are that author, allow me to rejoice. You have used your pain to heal so many other children." Maya's hands trembled. S.R. Brooks lay on the page like a glowing pebble. She looked around the room and saw the sunlight slip through the silk curtain and touch the edge of the velvet case. Maya opened it. Inside was a gold heart locket, a tiny letter R engraved on the back, likely for Rose. Inside the locket, one side held a photo of her mother around 7, with pigtails and smiling eyes. The other, a picture of a swaddled newborn, with tiny fists curled. "Little sister," Maya whispered, her chest tightening with a feeling both sharp and sweet, like touching a memory she'd never lived but belonged to her. She dug deeper and found a thick envelope that the Tennessee State Health Department had sealed. The front read, "Birth certificate copy issued at 18 years of age." She opened it. The yellow document contained typed information: biological parents, Edward Bennett and Ruth Bennett, née Collins. The line, "Child No. 2, female, born 3:42 a.m., the 15th of September, 1995. At the bottom, note, child number 1, Catherine Rose Bennett, born on, older sister." A current ran down Maya's spine. Bennett, no mistake, and the birth date. Maya remembered Serafina once joking that she was a Virgo girl who likes notebooks with margins. September 15. She dropped into the chair. The pieces fell silently into place, only her heart thumping louder. S. R. Brooks Serafina. Children's author check. Educational psychologist check. Catherine's biological sister check. And the person sitting under the oak, telling Maya daily about light and truth. A circle closed by the handwriting of the one who had gone. "Dad!" Maya called louder than she intended. Footsteps sounded from the end of the hall. Jake appeared in the doorway, hair mussed from hurrying. "What is it, honey?" Maya held out the birth certificate, the letter, the locket. Mom had a sister, and... Look. Jake took the paper, his hand stiffening. He read slowly, so pensive the room seemed to shrink around the words Catherine Rose Bennett. He turned to the letter, read a few lines, then looked up, his face as if wind-blown and sun-washed. "You're saying Serafina is..." Mom's sister Maya spoke softly, feeling a strange sound in her chest like breaking and fitting together at once. "Dad, do you remember how she laughed in the kitchen that night? There was something like Mom, not the face, but the way she listened. I believe it now because I have the papers, but my heart seems to have believed earlier." Jake pulled out a chair and sat slowly. He opened the locket and looked at the two tiny photos. Catherine used to speak of a nameless hole. It thought it was how she described a hard childhood. I didn't know it was this real. His voice lowered, a gentle sadness passing through the room like an old friend. "If Serafina is Catherine's sister, that means..." He didn't dare finish, afraid the sentence would shatter the air. "It means the way we met wasn't just beautiful. It's something bigger than us." Maya nodded, eyes clouded. "Dad, I want to call her over. Now, I can't let a truth like this sit alone in a box anymore." Jake stood, pulled out his phone, then paused. "I think it should be you who calls, but I'll sit here, next to you." He set his hand on Maya's shoulder. The steadiness of his palm calmed her. Maya dialed. 2 rings. "Maya?" Serafina answered, warm and low as usual, with a grain of fatigue she didn't hide. "Can you come to the Whitman estate? I have something Mom left, for you and for Dad." She heard her own voice tremble, a mix of fear and hope. Silence for a few beats, then a soft breath. "I'm coming." 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Serafina stood on the porch in a thin wool coat, tired but with eyes bright as fire. Maya opened the door and hugged her tight. "Come in." Jake waited in the living room, the AC humming gently, a vase of lilies Catherine had loved, set neatly on the table. Serafina sat on the edge of the couch and set her bag beside her, uncertain, like someone about to enter a challenging class. Maya put the wooden box on the table. "Mom hid this. She wanted us to find it at the right time." She slid over the first letter, the locket, and the birth certificate. Serafina looked at the paper, the locket, and the letter, as if her eyes had to learn a new language that was familiar and foreign. When her fingers touched the baby's photo, something in her face went still, like a lake suddenly windless. She opened the locket, laid it in her palm, and gently stroked the image of her mother at 7 almost unconsciously. "Here I am," she murmured to the photo. "Your older sister." Jake felt his throat tighten. He looked at the two women, one the old love of his life in another version, one the new love that had just found a name. He felt as if Catherine stood somewhere nearby, a hand on each of their shoulders, saying yes. Serafina read the letter. Each line was an arm reaching across the past, pulling the present close. When she reached the part where her mother suspected the author SRS, Brooks was her sister, Serafina's eyes fluttered fast, then brimmed. She knew. A smile broke through tears, beautiful and aching. She knew I was seen, before we even met. Catherine read the poem I hadn't yet read to myself. Maya flipped through a few more letters and handed over the journal. Mom wrote a lot about S. She said if they ever found each other, she wanted you to live in a house full of flowers, with someone pouring afternoon tea, and a half-height bookshelf in the middle of the room, so no one had to sit hidden. Sounds like a description of this living room. She laughed, wiping tears with the back of her hand. Jake leaned back, looking at Serafina carefully, as if afraid to break what was forming. If Catherine were here now, he said, word by word, I think she'd laugh and say, at last, the light found the right address. He looked at the locket in Serafina's hand. You have always been here. In this house, in many forms. Serafina pressed her lips together and set the locket between the three of them on the table, like planting a small flag on shared ground. I grew up in a loving family. My adoptive parents were good people. They gave me the surname Brooks, a reading room, and the right to believe words can save someone when needed. But my body always remembered a register no one had touched. Each time I wrote about children who were too different, I heard a whisper, "Do you see me?" Now I know it was Catherine's voice. She saw. Maya scooted her chair closer. Mom left one more thing. The last letter, written a few days before she died. She handed over a page softened by age. The ink had faded a bit, but was still legible. Dear S, if you're reading this, it means we found each other not in the way I wanted, hand in hand, but in the way I believe, through truth. I've always thought love doesn't die. It only changes form from person into wind, from memory into sky. If I have to go first, I want my wind to blow you to my home, where a man is trying his best in the kitchen, and a girl with eyes like dawn. Please tend that garden for me. Help the seeds there break through. And if you love, love as I do, love with truth, not with fear of what people say. Love you. C. The three were silent. A new sound appeared in the room, 3 heartbeats slowing to support one another. The sun tilted, light falling into thin ladders on the wooden floor. Maya squeezed Serafina's hand. I don't know how the future will turn out, or what the media will say, but I know a piece has just clicked into place. It tells me you belong here not by accident, but by fate. Serafina smiled through tears. Fate is a difficult word, she said, but if you like, we can call it the path of light. She turned to Jake, her voice dropping. Mr. Whitman, I know this might complicate things formally. I am your late wife's sister. I am the one your daughter trusts. I stand between lines that are easy to misunderstand. If you need, no. Jake cut in, gentle but firm. I don't need to retract anything we've just put into words. I do need a breath, but I don't need to step back. He looked straight at her, his smile slight but steady. If Catherine wrote this, she believed we could go on. I won't go against the woman who taught me the meaning of at peace. And you remind me of that definition. Maya looked at them both, surprised to find her heart no longer pulled like in the past days. It stood in a simple place, between those two, facing toward the side with the smell of the kitchen, laughter, and noons under an oak. Her phone buzzed. Maya looked. Principal Park texted, KVUE wants to do a follow-up. Do you want to give an official response? Reminder, you have the right to decline. Maya hesitated, then typed, I'll respond with a piece in my own words. No further interviews. She looked at Serafina and winked. I learned from you, choose your timing and language. Afternoon poured down like honey. They went to the kitchen. Jake, unsure what to do with his hands, started washing vegetables. Serafina helped slice tomatoes, movements slow as if entering the house's rhythm. Maya turned on a speaker and played a soft jazz track, Chet Baker's horn, like a one-on-one conversation. As flour dusted fingertips, as the knife tapped the board, as the scent of sautéed garlic rose like a happy memory, Maya told Serafina, a small story about her adoptive great-grandmother in Tennessee. Serafina told Maya about the old oak by the Columbia dorm where she used to read late into the night. Jake chimed in that Catherine planted lilies because her mother's name was Rose, and lilies smell like clean memory. Within that flow, the news Serafina is S.R. Brooks and Serafina is Catherine's sister didn't disappear. It dissolved like sugar in tea still sweet, only no longer sharp. The sky had turned deep blue when steaming pasta hit the table. They sat and raised glasses of water instead of wine. Jake said, "To Catherine, the one who wrote us the letter that leads the way." Maya said, "To Mom's sister who found her way home." Serafina said, "To you two, the ones who opened the door when outside noise could have made people lock it." Afterward, while clearing the table, Maya returned to Catherine's room, took an empty frame, set the locket inside, and placed it beside her mother's photo and a lily stem. She whispered, "Mom, your sister is home." A thin breeze brushed the curtain though the window was closed, the petals stirring as if nodding. Night fell. Serafina stood on the porch, ready to leave. Jake walked her to the door. They stood side by side without speaking for a while, the silence of people who have just crossed a long bridge. Finally, Jake said, "I don't know what pace to walk, so I don't step on anyone's old wounds. But I know the direction." He looked at her without flinching. "Walk with me." Serafina smiled, tired but warm. "If we walk side by side, no one steps on anyone, and if we do, we say sorry and learn the rhythm again." They laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was at the pitch of peace. Maya stood in the doorway, watching them, and felt the air around her change structure, lighter, steadier, like flour sifted well before baking. She thought of Stanford, of the email inviting her to interview for an honors scholarship that waited for her reply. She suddenly knew exactly who she wanted to read her answer first. Serafina, her mother's sister, the teacher with no nameplate, who engraved MW on her pen. "I'll write tomorrow," she told herself, "and we'll sign with our own names, no permission needed." That night, before bed, Maya opened her mother's journal near the end. There was a short note, not part of any narrative thread, like a message left behind for whoever came after. "If one day the house has laughter in the kitchen again, Catherine, remember not to forget to set another chair." Maya smiled, closed the journal, went to the kitchen, took a spare stool, and set it by the table like a ritual. She turned off the lights, leaving a slight glow by her mother's photo. Somewhere in the house, memory shifted to make room for the present. At the same time, in the apartment on the city's south side, Serafina held a copy of the birth certificate and the letter in her hands, sitting by the window. The street lamp cast a thin rim of light on the table's edge. She called her adoptive younger brother in Tennessee Noah. "Hey," she said, her voice trembling slightly, happiness mingled with worry. "I found them, my birth family. My sister Catherine is gone, but her daughter and her husband, they're home. I think I'll stay in Austin." On the other end, Noah was silent for a beat, then laughed loudly. "You've stayed for a long time already. You just didn't know it. I'm happy for you." Serafina hung up and opened her notebook. She wrote, "Today, the words destiny no longer scare me, because they're not a rope that binds, but a red thread that connects." She paused and added, "Tomorrow, 12:15, the oak." The next morning, the oak canopy was still round like a giant umbrella. Maya arrived early with 3 cups, black coffee for Dad, a latte for Serafina, and mint tea for herself. Jake stood at the edge of the courtyard, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a phone switched off. When Serafina arrived, they didn't say hello like every other day. They let their hands touch lightly over the 3 cups, in place of a promise. In the distance, Rose Courtyard heard the sound of classes rising like waves. Here, a family of 3 plus the one who had gone began to learn a new language that needs no permission to call one another by the most actual names. On the morning of December 20, Austin's sky was crystal cold. A rare overnight snowfall had dusted the western hills, making the Whitman estate gleam like a winter palace. Inside, the smell of waffles and fresh pine drifted through the halls, mingling with the sound of Maya practicing violin for the wedding that afternoon. Today, Jake Whitman would marry again, this time to Serafina, the woman who had entered his life not only as his daughter's teacher, but as Catherine's missing piece. The upstairs bedroom was bright with thin, golden Sunday. Serafina stood before the mirror, wearing the pure white gown she and Maya had chosen at a small South Congress shop. Simple, no fussy lace, just draped silk, and a slender necklace bearing the locket Catherine left behind. Maya stepped in, pale lilac dress, half-up curls, eyes shining. "You look like a princess," Maya whispered, hesitantly touching the dress. "No," Serafina smiled. "Eyes dewy. Today I'm just myself and your mother's sister." The words made Maya burst into tears. She hurried to wipe them, afraid of smudging her fresh makeup. "I just wish Mom could be here." "I think," Serafina said, fingers touching the locket, "she is here, in your smile and how your father looks at me." Downstairs, Jake was busy with Matthias, his best friend and best man, arranging flowers. He wore a midnight blue suit, a silver tie, and his graying hair neatly combed. When he saw Maya leading Serafina down the stairs, his heart tightened. All the outside chatter, all the gossip, suddenly dissolved. He saw only one thing. This was his family. The ceremony was held in the back garden, beneath the ancient oak, where the three of them had had their most important conversations. The guest list was small, about 60 close friends, a few of Maya's former teachers, some of Jake's colleagues, and a handful of Serafina's old friends from Colombia. Chairs lined both sides of an aisle strewn with white rose petals. Catherine's photo stood beside a vase of lilies on a small altar. The violin sounded. Maya strolled, holding a bouquet of lavender and white roses. Behind her, Serafina came arm in arm with Noah, her adoptive younger brother who had flown in from Tennessee. He looked at her and smiled. "You're not walking alone anymore." Jake stepped forward, his eyes openly shining. When his hand took Serafina's, the whole garden seemed quiet. The minister began, voice warm and low. "Today, we witness not only the union of two people, but the rejoining of two stories that seemed broken. A new love born of memory, truth, and courage." When it was time for vows, Jake unfolded a small piece of paper and put it away. "I meant to write this, but words feel unnecessary when I look at you. I only want to say, Serafina, you gave back to me and my daughter something we thought we'd lost the light in this house. I promise never to let you forget that you belong here, not because you're a PhD, author, or Catherine's sister, but because you are you, and I love you." Serafina drew a breath, her voice trembling but steady. "Jake, I once thought I could only be a shadow, the observer, the one who quietly mops the floor while others shine. But you and Maya showed me that light is never a burden. I promise to stand with you in every storm, love Maya as my daughter, and live worthy of Catherine's second love to all three of us." Maya stepped forward with a carefully folded letter. "This is my mother's final message, left in her journal. I want to read it to you both." Her voice was clear. "If my sister is reading this, and Jake is listening, then what I prayed for has come true. Love each other with truth. Don't fear the whispers. Teach my daughter that intelligence is not a burden but a gift. And remember, love doesn't die, it simply finds a new home." No one kept their tears. The minister nodded gently, then said, "With all the love present here of the living and of memory, I pronounce you husband and wife." Applause erupted. Jake kissed Serafina, not hurried, not showy, only deep and sure. Maya laughed through her tears and shouted, "The Whitman family complete." The reception unfolded in the ballroom, crystal lights glittering. A three-tiered cake covered in white flowers, adorned with three little figures, a man, a woman, and a girl holding hands. Jake led Serafina in his arms as the first waltz began, while Maya danced with Noah, laughter filling the room. Late that night, after the guests had gone, the three stepped onto the back porch. Snow fell in flurries, dusting the oak's branches. Maya leaned on Serafina's shoulder and murmured, "I think Mom is smiling." Jake squeezed his new wife's hand. Serafina looked at father and daughter, tears mingling with her smile. "I know, and so am I." Someone, Or perhaps the wind had placed another white rose on the small altar by the oak's trunk. No one could explain it, but all three understood. Catherine had left her final blessing. That night, beneath the cold stars, a new family began not only through the love of the present, but through a love that transcended time and led them to find one another.